How we doing, everyone?
All fine. I'm fine. Hope everyone else is fine.
Happy to be here and a little tired. How are
Okay.
you all?
Hanging in there.
Doing well.
It's a long day. Hmm.
Good evening, everyone.
Hello, Dwayne. Nice to see you.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Peter Andrews. They're still showing up. We'll give them a few more minutes.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you from Australia?
Hi, yeah. My name's Martima Grace Brownston. I'm here with Peter Andrews.
Good morning.
Hello.
It's a delight to see you. Good morning. I guess this is what happens when you have a meeting at 9 p.m. Other people show up. It's great.
Well, it was pretty cool. We just got the text. I think we just got a text through saying that the Eco Restoration Alliance is having a meeting, and Peter said, "Oh, do we want to be a part of this?" And I thought, well, I don't know. Haven't met them before, but let's try. So yeah, what a cool thing. So it's 9 p.m. for you guys there and 11 a.m. for us here.
That's right. And just so you understand, we will go this way again in 6 weeks. We have a rotating schedule, 9 p.m. and then 9 a.m. Well, this time and then 12 hours later, and then 6 hours later, and then 6 hours later. And then it skips over again until 12 hours later. It's in the calendar, a link to which Cole Enos will put into the chat because it's really impossible to remember.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Cool. So you guys work with Michael Kravchuk?
We do.
Beautiful.
We're hoping that a small delegation of you people come to Australia and we wander through it, because it's been my opinion for a long time that it produces unique opportunities for the whole planet, simply because it was evolved by plants and they created this pattern of feedback loops that I believe we could easily identify and transfer to anybody interested in taking the advice from that evidence.
Our operators are waiting for your call. I've never been to Australia, and I can't imagine a better way to go.
I can promise you there's, and I went to Namibia and I've been up to the top of the Colorado and to England, of course, but the things that happen here are unique in such that it was a very, very old landscape. It's probably 10 times older, not all of it, but blocks of it. And so it evolved sort of historically, singing birds, flowering plants, and 2/3 of the fish species. So I'm saying it's kind of a blueprint
Yeah.
for the damage we've created, humans that is, in most other parts of the planet. This actually lost the service of its rivers before it broke away from the big landmass, and therefore it had to be floodplains needed to recover. And of course, in that process, it's given us those feedback loops and blueprints in all sorts of scales. And the problem in this, you can't sit down and write it, simply because, you know, in the case of a feedback loop, if it's positive, it goes forward. If it's negative, it goes backwards. But in this case, because we've had first Aborigines and then the Europeans and then 500 different species of animals, we've got very short-term evidence of how those damaged places have also next to them solutions sitting. So that's the opportunity I hope we can get people like yourself and everyone working with.
A filmmaker should be a part of that junket, expedition.
We've got a filmmaker and I've got a world traveler here who's multicultural, and we're trying to do all those things, but you've never got too good a team, you know.
Yeah.
We're always looking for new participants and a good brain to help bring this into a. I thought it was simple. 40 years ago, I thought all I have to do is talk about it and it would happen. But anyway, we're still trying. I'm still.
All right, then. Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. I assume you know your fellow Australian Dwayne.
Yes, I do.
All
He
right,
worked as my PA for 12 years.
there you go. That's right. I knew
Had
that.
he's had a bit of a problem with
Enough.
hey, his management of sugars and so on. So he's a bit of a grade 1 diabetic, and of course it gives him trouble when he gets stressed and so on. So he dropped out of this daily work, and I think he's still there, still always.
Yeah, still very
Yeah.
passionate about it.
He's still here. He's on this call, by the way. But
Oh, beautiful. Hey, Dwayne.
Migraine.
I had the pleasure of meeting him a few weeks ago, and he is a terrific explainer. He just rattles off these really fluid explanations of what's going on. So I look forward to continuing all of these conversations. So it's 9:07.
Oh, yeah. Introduce us. Kick us off.
All right. Now, well, so fine. It's 9:07. This is our bi-weekly town hall meeting of the Eco Restoration Alliance. This one is at 9 p.m. Eastern time, so it's late for some of us, but that also means we have people from the other side of the world joining us. Next week, it will be at 9 a.m. Eastern, and then 6 hours later, and then 6 hours later. And that is our schedule. We have an agenda, a link to which I'm going to put in the chat. Now I'm going to just let Cole do it because he does everything faster and with fewer errors. And we will go through the agenda, starting with updates from members who we haven't heard from for a while. And Peter, I didn't get the name of your companion. There you go, that person. Who are you?
I'll let her say it because it's a Maori name.
So to pronounce it properly, it's Marama. Marama, but you're more than welcome to call me Min.
Min. Okay, nice to meet you, Min. Nice to see you again, Peter. Dwayne, you were here a little while ago, so unless you have any updates for us, you need not report in.
No updates, no important updates anyway, John, not at this stage.
Okay, very good. Laura, it's nice to see you here again. Are you here this time because of the time zone or just because we got lucky?
Both. I'm lucky as well. So it's good to see everybody get a chance to connect and hear.
Great.
And I'm looking forward to, I believe there's also going to be another working meeting, right, on May 10th that Judy's been pulling together.
That is exactly right. So let's just review the bidding on that event. On May 11th, 1 week from today, at I think from 4 p.m. Eastern until 6 p.m. Eastern, but Cole will check me on that. Jeff Goebbels and Elizabeth, whose last name I'm blanking on, and Judith Schwartz and Marna are all going to be Wednesday 11th. There it is from, says Russ Spear. Okay, we'll get the specifics. But it is a meeting based on the consensus process that a number of us will be participating in. I don't know whether it's full up, but I do know that we don't want too large a group. But if you would like to participate and you haven't been informed about it, please feel free to write to Judith Schwartz and ask if there are still some seats available. This is sort of a consensus envisioning workshop. It's meant to be an opportunity for us to Just talk about why we're here, what our goals are, how we see ourselves. And related to that will be a discussion today about a possible mission statement that's been put forward by Adam Sachs. So that is that event. We can proceed to meet new people. Will Crombie is not here, but he is a filmmaker and a restorationist who is going to be working with us on website and other things. There's a link to him, to our conversation with him in the agenda, and that includes a video of the conversation, which was quite stimulating. So be aware that you can catch up on new members. And by the way, this is also our opportunity for anyone who wants to weigh in on new members once we've met them, just to send private notes if there are any concerns. This has not happened, and I don't expect it to happen, but it is part of our process. Okay, and then Marna Schwartz, who is with us in static image and on mute, but maybe she's there. She is, she lives. Okay. Marna, would you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do and why you're here.
Happy to. Hi, everybody. My name is Marna Schwartz. I live in Albany, New York, the traditional land of the Haudenosaunee and the Mohican people. And I'm very, very happy to be here with everyone. I've been a long-term member of the Global Regeneration Collab, which has been meeting for about 2 years now. And I've been a facilitating member, which means that I get to help curate and guide the conversation sometimes. It's been a wonderful opportunity to be with a field of people who are thinking about and caring about what I'm caring about, which I believe also all of you are caring about. So it's very wonderful to meet you and connect. I live here in Albany with my boyfriend. We have 5 chickens, and I feel like one of the gifts of the pandemic is really learning about how to perpetuate the nutrient cycle in a hyper-local fashion. And I'm eager to learn more about that and instigate nature first, ecology meets economy meets common sense for as many people as possible. So I'm excited to be here and see where the conversation leads us. Nice to meet you all. I look forward to connecting more. Thanks.
Thank you. Great that you could make it. Are there any other updates from people who we've seen recently, but who might have some news?
If I may say, I've been my first involvement in this discussion, but we've had this whole land go through a drought, then fires, then floods, and now sort of a pandemic. I grew up in a very arid part of the country, and it was then disease-free, even though I had uncles that would send sheep particularly up that were diseased and they would recover. So I had then moved to a estuarine area near Adelaide, and then to a catchment area or watershed area up in the Hunter Valley. And I am sure that this old landscape has these components in it that if we take the trouble to get the very best scientific assessments, it would be enlightening for almost every part of the world. And one of the biggest things that some 15 years ago, we were asked to green the Sahara. And I'm sure that this old landscape contains the blueprints that would allow that to happen. And I know that, Jan Pagoni and Michael Krabsek and these guys who've been out 4 times and traveled with me for up to 10 days. And we spoke to all the authorities. It is time we became a really cohesive professional group, not based on anyone's opinion, but based on an opportunity that I'm sure exists.
Well, here. I wonder, since you're fresh to this, if you have any fresh thoughts for us about what it would mean to become a coherent and professional group, because that's really the stage we're at. We have a really, I think, interesting and powerful group of people. And we are now going through a process of figuring out how to, if you will, sharpen the spear to have maximal impact.
Well, 1980, I sought out the most experienced individual I could find, a fellow called Robert Somervale. He sent 7 scientists to come look at me. I'm just wanting to introduce this as a prelude to long-term development and investigation. He said, you realize that this ancient land has produced the evidence that the world is predicted to spend $360 trillion attempting to solve. And we need to bring this into a really professional focus. I'm sure it's not a wild statement, it's a factual process. And what I've been told, once again, because I had a fellow getting to the best brains in the world and telling me that if I couldn't put the practical evidence into demonstration and combine it with the most rigorous science, this would never happen. I am certain, and I've got these people around me now that have only known me for a little while, and they've traveled the world and parts of Australia. And what I've been attempting to do was condense the real processes that every part of the landscape requires, which is the most efficient storage and then use of water, and its automatic delivery of fertility simultaneous to the water movement. And obviously all of the catchwords of it must recycle, it must have biodiversity, and it must have water efficiency, and then it must manage the sun's energy. All of those things are uniquely available from this landscape.
So he said you needed to demonstrate that it can work, and you needed adequate scientific evidence.
Yes.
Do you feel you've done that part?
I promise, I guarantee. And I've got a woman here that's been examining this, and I've got a group with Newcastle University, and I've actually worked with 14 different universities. But the problem is, when you speak of $360 trillion and you speak of something like 127 trillion a year, people, humans that is, seem to lose the functional process of bringing it all together simply. They all want to make a big fortune or own it or whatever. And it's not going to happen, in my opinion. Otherwise, it'll be destroyed as everything else has in the past.
So Peter, I missed what the 360 trillion was related to. That's what it will cost?
Related to our ability to manage climate, fertility, and landscapes.
And
Basically, it's basically how much the scientific community is going to pay to restore the basic function systems of our planet by reductionist, scientific, theoretical, whatever, blah, 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 instead of looking at the blueprint of how the hydrology works. How does your soil get built? What do plants do for your climate? The simplicity behind all of that. Instead of looking at the simplicity, we spend billions of dollars, trillions of dollars on reductionist interventions that only last for 10 years, and then we have to spend another $1 billion on fixing them up again. So instead of that being a thing, we should be looking at how the landscape operates, how the systems intertwine, what the function of those systems are in the bigger picture, and also to acknowledge that we're only scraping the surface of any of this knowledge anyway.
There are many good explainers.
I mean, she tells me off all the time. She said, nobody understands what you're talking about. I said, yeah, but I'm telling you the truth as it visually exists. And she can interpret it to make people like yourself understand the magnitude of this whole process. And she does it very well. I mean, she came to me nearly 12 months ago, and in 3 days was able to answer questions that nobody that's been around me for 40 years answers. So she's a link in, and sort of, I would say, an irreplaceable link in some of this system.
All right, well, I hope everyone else is as fascinated as I am. We don't usually drill down like this, but Min, welcome to the Eco Restoration Alliance. Would you like to introduce yourself as a person?
Hi, crew. Hold on, the phone's doing funny things. We're sitting in the sunshine, so sometimes it overheats. Hold on, let me get the sunshine. Hi, so my name is Marta Grace Brownston. As PA said, I've been working with him for about a year. My biggest fixation is that because they've told us since I was a child, climate change is this massive issue, global warming, the carbon issue, the water's dying, everything's dying, we're all screwed. And that was really the rhetoric that was pumped into our brains from about 8 years old. So I'm 26 now, I'm turning 27 this year. And it took the absolute life of me, it took to really go, what's the solution? What is the answer? Okay, I can sit here in my depression and my anxiety and in all my issues and whatever else and not look for an answer, or I can look for an answer. And got put in touch with Peter Andrews, who then went, well, how do you think climate's built? And I said, well, what is climate? And he's gone, great question. And so we've started to analyze that and gone, well, basically plants processing thermal heat, managing water and nutrients is what creates climate. And I thought, wow.
And life.
And life, of course, and having bio in that. But I thought, wow. So we do have a solution. So we can make a difference. So there is a way forward and we can practically do something about it now. Oh, well, then what's all the waffle been about? What's all the, why is there not more of this being pushed? Why is there not more of this being promoted? So then I just got stuck into it. And yeah, a year later, we're just sort of at the same position where we're like, how do we, introduce this to mainstream consciousness? How do we break the paradigms that have shaped 200 years of that European-centric reductionist scientific thinking?
Reductionist measurement and making descriptions from something that has never been proven to last a long time. What we'd have, of course, as I repeat, the oldest landscape with the most extreme circumstances. It doesn't have natural climate systems like snow-fed rivers and mountains, and it doesn't have water in the center. It's a huge big patch of land that was once barren. And then the amazing results of plants managing the way water could be used to de-energize itself was incredible. And I thought, wow, this is just the answer to everything, because floods were managed, water was managed, fire was managed, and the highest levels of fertility, because we had megafauna, the biggest plants and animals on the system, on the planet. And I said, if that was automatic and it cost nothing, why can't we all do it? We've got huge technical abilities today. Anyway, I'll pass it back, because she gets cranky with me because I get too detailed. And
Yeah, he does. He throws people in the deep end and expects people to catch up. But the moral of what I want to say is that there is a solution. I truly and firmly believe that we can solve these climate issues that we have in the next 2 years, particularly with the carbon absorption. Everything's made of carbon. Carbon is not the enemy. We are all carbon-based life forms. Therefore, how do we process the carbon that is around in the most effective ways? And the simple answer is plants. So that's that.
and efficient water management.
Oh yeah, water, plants, sunlight. Okay, if we want to list the whole simplicity, water, plants, sunlight. And there's, thank you, John. Yeah, that's the little video that Pete Dowson whipped up.
If I could just use an example, what do you think climate change is? Well, I said I could stay in a rainforest for a few weeks. The temperature varies about 15 degrees. Then I go 300 yards away where it's been clear and it goes through as much as 70 degrees. This silly old fool think that's climate change. Anyway, take it as you like.
So,
Thanks.
well, thank you. Listen, Min, so you identified the solution, but you also identified the deeper problem, which still needs a solution, which is how do we break through 200 years of reductionist thinking that leads to interventions that only last 10 years? Don't leave us hanging, Min. What's the answer to that question?
Oh my God, if we knew the answer to that, John, it would be a lot easier of a conversation every day. I think the thing that we're communicating today, and actually tonight we're having a Whole of Landscape Alliance webinar, so it's actually kind of cool timing. But we're appealing to our First Nations, so our First People, number one, to our youth, number two, to our practitioners and scientists, number three. And I think with those three tiers of demographics, I think that's where the catalyst lives. So with our Indigenous, with our youth, and with our practical application people. And through those people and through the demonstrations, I mean, Peter's got 25 demonstration properties that are visible, like, and interactable in Australia. And then there's hundreds of other intervention properties that have been done. So we have the demonstrations that prove over a large space and over a longer time that they're efficient hydrological restorations, right? We have those that are proved in the ground. So now we've got the demonstrations, we've got the science, we've got international relations. I mean, we quote you guys all the time, as in Michael Kravchuk and, you know, Jan and Walter Ripple, William Ripple. We quote them all the time with what they were able to see. So we've got the science, we've got the demonstrations, now we need the people. And it's probably quite similar in America, although you guys have a bigger population, but 85% of our population lives around the coastlines or in cities. So you mentioned soil, you mentioned farming, you mentioned dirt. They have no clue. They have no relatability. Why would I want to be involved? Is it Macca's food? What do you mean? Is it McDonald's food? You go, no, unfortunately not. I wish it was. Maybe we'd have healthier children.
My hope is that we end up, because Min's just told you, we have a bottom-up guaranteed. We need just a smidgen of top-down, but we need you people in between. And if we can do those two things, and I would try to pull all this together, because we obviously have an election coming up in 21st of May. And in that meantime, I think we should be bringing the real science, the real evidence, the real truth that this community has at their fingertips or at their under their feet, and just using people like yourself to say, well, why don't we just analyze this? Because today there are no secrets in the world. You can see from satellite what I'm doing everywhere. And so I can't tell any stories that suit me. I tell the story as they are out there in the landscape as best I can, and Min translates it to people like yourself who sort of make some sense of what I'm trying to talk about. Anyway, I'll pass you back to her because she's good at it.
We make a good team, an unlikely team, but a good team.
All right.
But also, I take a lot of time. Like, I really admire what Dwayne was able to facilitate during his time. And honestly, I just admire you so much, Dwayne, because 12 years is a whole nother level.
All right. It is a pleasure to make your
He put
acquaintance.
this nasty slant on me as being something difficult to manage. I said, I only tell you the truth. If you can't manage the truth, then you have a problem, not me.
And that's really taken Australian population by storm. No, look, we're doing it. We're doing it. And you guys are doing it. And being a part of something like this just proves that something is happening. And this movement, they can't control us. I mean, we were just talking about it this morning. The best way to convince 85% of an old paradigm that any of this is worth doing is by showing them the better quality of life we have, is by eating more nutritious food, is by creating healthy river systems and waterways. The proof is in the pudding. And I really think that that is like, yeah, it's hard. The hardest thing to argue with is like the proof. So let's just keep proving.
Okay, thank you very much. I was saying, geez, I didn't have any coffee before this meeting. Now I don't need it. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to meet you both.
Thank you, John.
Okay, so we met Marna, we met Min unexpectedly. I want to introduce Evan Blackman. Evan is someone I've been working with for a couple of years. He is an accountant. He is a longtime volunteer with the Enable Network. And he changed my life a couple of years ago when he said, I can take that rat's nest of accounting you've been doing for Enable over the years and actually put it into QuickBooks and get it organized. And we can keep track of the money, and it's all been going really smoothly. I approached him a few weeks ago to say, listen, sooner or later, the Eco Restoration Alliance is going to have some money it wants to deal with. And we have some experience about one way of dealing with it. would you be interested in working with us? And he said, yes, I've been wanting to get involved in climate. And so that's how come Evan shows up all of a sudden. He presented a document to me this evening, and I said, this is great. Come and meet the Alliance, the people you're going to be working with. So here he is. Evan, just give us a little bit of your bio. I know I gave the immediate backstory, but give us a little of your bio just so people know your voice and how you came this way.
Okay. Yeah, like my name is Evan Blackman. I am an accountant. As exciting as that is, I met John when I joined Enable in December of 2019. I, just wanted to volunteer and help, and I found his organization through Google, of course, and just hopped in since they were super encouraging about just having the initiative, and I did so. I volunteered my accounting services, helped them get everything sorted out, and now I help manage their Enable fund. Just some other facts, like I'm from Texas, but I moved to New England of the United States, so now I live in Pennsylvania. 24, and I'm a twin. That's a fun fact. And I'm here to help John with potentially a eco restoration fund as well.
That's right. So you are a twin, you said.
Yes, that's my fun fact.
What does the other Blackman do? The other Blackman boy?
He works at a grocery store.
Cool. All right. So Evan, thanks for showing up. The next item on our agenda is, in fact, to talk about some money-related topics. And Philip agreed to lead that discussion. So we will turn to it next.
So I frequently have bandwidth issues. I'm going to turn off my video, take a good look. I'll be back after I finish speaking. So John asked me to lead on that, but he has some of the details. This is prompted in part by my local desire, living in one of the wealthier counties in the United States, to direct people with money towards projects that could make a difference in cooling. And I have a long-term project I'm working on with an intern to produce a couple of ranked lists of those opportunities. But in the short term, the idea was that we might be able to, amongst ourselves, amongst Alliance members, put forward some ideas. The first of which was catalyzed by an acute need. Marius has tried to join us from Uganda a number of times and had connectivity issues. So John did some research and found that there's actually a cafe or a business center or something that provides good connectivity and an iPad, but of course costs money to use. And with some help from a funder in Australia, all those folks in Australia, who's been supporting and coaching Marius. Some of the money was raised, and then I think John is willing to have his name attached to the other parcel of funds. So this is kind of a first project that the Alliance has supported someone financially to help them be better connected to us. Do you want to say anything more about that, John?
No, at this point, not. Later, if we want to, I can show his budget. I can explain a little bit more about how it was spent and why I thought it was a good investment. And then we can talk about a possible way in which it can be a good investment on the part of the ERA or not. That's sort of the larger question, is whether we want to get into that game. But let's review the other money-related themes that are going on right now. So for example, Philip, you are also creating this list of cooling related projects worth investing in. You want to talk about how that list would be used once it existed and how it would or wouldn't relate to the ERA?
Yeah, so hinted at that. The idea is my initial audience is my friends and enemies in the region where I live, to make a suggestion that a dollar spent, for example, in a country that's restoring degraded land on the edge of the Sahel is probably going to go 10 or 100 times farther than a dollar spent in Montgomery County, where everything's very expensive and actually we're pretty green and there's not a lot of wiggle room we have for making improvements for cooling the planet. So that's the initial target, is to present a list to these people to say, here are worthy sites. Initially, they would be ongoing projects. The longer term is to qualify those in terms of scalability. So for example, Seacom, which was the project we put forth when we entered the milestone competition that we didn't win, but Seacom, I think they've restored 25 or 30 hectares, and they have now a plan for scaling to 5 additional sites over the next decade. So that's one example of something that would be a worthwhile, recipient of funds for doing what they hope to achieve. We hope to identify others amongst our ranks, other audiences beyond, my initial, co-residents would be some of the environmental groups that are sort of making decisions about currently, advocating, for example, for solar and wind, which may not have the same impact, in fact, may be counterproductive in the short run in terms of heating, particularly solar farms, but to lobby them to consider adding to their list of worthwhile projects, these kinds of things. The secondary list that Lindsay and I, my intern in South Africa, are working on is to identify potential new sites. Where are the factors of readily restored land adjacent to population centers, adjacent to the infrastructure in a relatively conflict-free zone, where we might, leverage the involvement of other international donor agencies to say, hey, can you help us start up a new project here because we think it could have a significant impact. So that's sort of the larger one. I think John also wanted to suggest that, well, my idea was to start in the short term by just asking everybody, if somebody was to make a donation to your organization, what would you spend it on? And put that together into a list. And that could be, I think, something that we as a whole could review and adjust and then make public as a way of serving the, ourselves as Alliance members. What else, John?
I think that's great. I think the idea that this group, or as Peter Andrews calls them, us people, are actually in a pretty good position to review and evaluate a number of these projects and to recommend ones that also tell a story, that just keep proving, as Min might say, that this can be done and it can be expanded. And that if you're wondering what to do with your money, we can point you in that direction. And I think that might be, the cachet of the ERA and its members might add a little something to encourage people to go forward. And it might also be a nice way of helping to solidify our vision of who we are and what we're doing. Yes, sir.
I want to go back to, you had first on your list ERA fund, and I think you've kind of proven the need for that by Marius's example, and part of that might be that collectively, or whoever is so inclined, we put in a few dollars just so we have a reserve for those kinds of needs. But then there's the question that if we do come up with this list of approved projects, how is that administered? Do the funds come to ERA and then they get parceled out, or do we encourage people to make direct contributions to those in need.
Well, it's a good question. And why don't we expand from a dialogue to a multi-log and just see if other people have thoughts about this array of money-related issues. Laura has her hand up.
Well, I have a question. I'd like to know then, is the ERA then a 501c3 and it receives donations in that way? Is it a fiscal sponsor for these different projects that have come in? Because I have some familiarity with that with Earth Island Institute, where I'm the director of one of their 80 some projects, my project being Viva Sierra Gorda. And it is quite a heavy load for Earth Island Institute in order to donate out what was received to each of those projects. I would love for there to be a fund. I'd love for there to be a way to incentivize more organized civil society organizations, but I think that these need to be very clear game rules.
Well, I agree with that. I have some experience with that, and I have a relevant partial answer to your question. Enable, as Evan has told you, has been around for about 8 years. We had a fiscal sponsor. We eventually realized that we actually had some people who wanted to give us, well, $500,000. We created a nonprofit. That was a disaster. Then a few years later, and the nonprofit went off and et cetera. A few years later, someone wanted to give us $50,000, YouTube, as a matter of fact. And we didn't even have a bank account to put it in. So we did eventually create a nonprofit, which I run, called Rochester Enable Limited. And it does act as a fiscal sponsor for the Enable movement. And Evan actually does the 501c3 and the 990s and so on. But it's a small scale operation. And what's most interesting about that is our decision-making process, which I'll get back to. In answer to your question, the ERA is a project of Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, which is a 501c3 and which actually has funded some of our web development and all of Cole's valuable time. They have Biodiversity for a Livable Climate is also open to being a fiscal sponsor for other ERA relevant projects or affiliate organizations.
Does that
And
include internationally, John?
Adam, you probably ought to be the person to stutter over that question.
Yeah, I don't really know the answer to that. But as a US 501c3, we have a degree of latitude that maybe Evan can explain.
Evan, do you know how that works?
What was the question again?
The question is whether our nonprofit status can extend to a non-US organization.
I do not know. I do want to know more about like international nonprofit law, but I'm only US focused.
Okay.
It's not whether our status can extend overseas, it's whether we as a nonprofit can receive funds and then pay those out overseas.
Well, I can tell you that we have been doing that for Enable fairly routinely. There are two issues. The charter of the fiscal sponsor needs to include the activities in question. If obviously this would all need to be checked, but if Bio for Climate's corporate charter embraces eco-restoration in all its forms, that's one thing. If it says within the continental United States, that would prohibit them doing this kind of thing. Now, the charter can be amended, but those are the constraints, as I understand them. Secondly, the key value of a 501c3 is that American donors can get tax write-offs from making those donations. And I predict, we will have to check this, but I predict that if an American donor wants to make a donation to Bio for Climate to be administered by Bio for Climate or for the ERA for projects outside of the United States, I think that works for the donor and for the fiscal sponsor and for the recipient, although I can't speak to their tax obligations in their own country. Laura, that's the range of questions. Now, my question for you is, why do you ask? Are you in the market for fiscal sponsor?
Well, no, I'll be honest. I've been monitoring the conversations that have been happening on the email and in the flow of conversations that have been happening around carbon. As you know, Sierra Gorda has been a pioneer in making the voluntary carbon market available to finance the extreme poverty landowners of high biodiversity areas here in central Mexico. And this through an innovation in the very local protocol at a subnational level, at what here in Mexico are states, and the state of Querétaro creating a public policy that allows for the financing of the regenerative management of ecosystems, removing livestock in order for natural regeneration to take place, in order for there to be the capture of carbon under the soil, as well as biomass above the soil. And so this is this has been a long haul of pulling this strategy and this mechanism to be recognized by the federal government, by the state government, to be considered as a replicable strategy to the states of Mexico. And so we've recently asked Judy Schwartz to be a speaker for an event at the beginning of June with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in Mexico, who is inviting the 32 states of Mexico in order to learn about what is these regenerative management. And we're asking Judy to come not just as an author, but as a representative of the Eco Restoration Alliance, because we feel that that's an important factor for the states to understand the relevance of these issues, and in order to be able to incentivize people to change. And so my question goes towards, I'm seeing all of the people that have been talking about carbon have been talking about the regulated market carbon, which for me is a very exclusionary and very
Byzantine?
Fortunately, the old paradigm system. And there are these alternatives that have been working in Mexico and in other areas that refer to the financing of conservation, taking into account these benefits of carbon, biodiversity, water. And so we would like to think about not just other states and other NGOs in Mexico taking this strategy forward, but that organizations that have this capability that we see that are present here in this network, to look at the way to be able to have these carbon reduction units, which is what we call them, and be able to generate financing with a very high degree of robust data, and being able to mobilize the resources that are out there, that financing resources that are out there. I think all of us are trying to get access to in order for the land to be able to benefit. So my questions are going in that direction. That's why I'm really interested to see where ERA is going, and how can we help to jump forward. We need to stop just talking about reforestation. We need to be talking with the same passionate voice of our friends in Australia, and how do we get this, how do we get more people involved, and how do we get those tools that have been working into the right hands. And so this is an invitation to start thinking about how can we mobilize financing with viable and proven strategies that talk about carbon or other benefits from the landscape or from the ecosystems that all of us have been fighting and looking at how we can monitor and you know, and put a value on. So that's where I was going.
Well, that's great. So I think you've got two bits of news there. One is that you've had a legislative breakthrough, which is that the door is now open for you to do what you've been lobbying for. But B, therefore, you're now in a position to say, if we could get money, we could do it. And so what's the mechanism for getting the money? And it has to do with voluntary carbon markets. And your distinction between voluntary and regulated carbon markets and what you're envisioning as your solution would be something I'd love to see in a page or two, because we do have a number of people that we've been talking to who are all sort of bobbling around on this whole question of finance. And it sounds like you might be a really good case to work through with, especially if Judy and the ministers are all getting together. So I would encourage you to give us something to work with.
Will do. I'd be happy to.
That's great. Thank you. Marna, your hand went up.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to quickly plant a seed of consideration around visibility and the idea of, you know, in permaculture, we talk about a demonstration site. And so cultivating opportunities that are visible in some way feels important. Like, I mean, all opportunities are important. And if the idea is to help propagate the attitude and methodology and mindset, I think that having things be as visible as possible and sharing narratives that people can relate to feels important. I just wanted to plant that seed. Thank you.
Well, I think that's right. That's going to be relevant to our discussion of mission and to our discussion of social media. So you get to complain if we don't cover those topics before we're done tonight. Adam hand went up first, but
what?
But Philip had his hand up, but I don't think he needs to interrupt.
That's
your
all right.
turn,
You can.
Adam.
Well, I want to thank Laura because she gave me a perfect segue into what you said we would talk about later, which is mission. And it sounds like this is a good opportunity to start, unless you have some other path that you wanted to follow, John.
No, I think that's fine, but let's let Philip get his word in.
Yeah, thank you, Laura, for your contribution. I think you're pointing to something we've touched on before that's a lot more complicated, and we do need to proceed, and there are other people involved in that, and you should be pulled into those discussions. I think the hashtag might have been #CCC for those threads. But what I was proposing earlier is something that is not constrained with consideration for getting credits or anything, but just as a way to direct funds to worthy projects. And it probably will be imperfect to start, but I want to get it started sooner because the clock is ticking on global warming. And as a way of closing off this discussion, for now anyway, I'm going to step forward and say I'm going to start a thread on our discussion list with the hashtag #funds request, and invite anybody that wants to identify projects that would benefit from funding to post to the list, and I'll compile those, and we'll come back to this at some future town hall with a way of reviewing it and maybe making improvements in the decision-making process about where the funds go.
That was perfect, Philip. You raised the issue, you let the discussion go, and then you offered to address the problem with the next first step. What a guy. And I will then share the Maria story in that thread as an example of a potentially worthy cause for the group to get behind. So that's great. So, Adam, you
Yes.
recently passed to me or someone a mission statement. And it's clarifying. So the floor is yours, because I think you wanted to make use of the segue and you wanted to frame the conversation.
When the Eco Restoration Alliance was being conceived and set on its way mid last summer, we started with the idea that we would enter the X Prize competition, and with the thinking that it would be really nice to win $1 million, but that's not why we were doing it. We were doing it, the discussion went at the time, in order to give regenerative land management, eco-restoration, our whole package, a global public stage to stand in the center of and to trumpet in every direction how essential this is, because we have literally hundreds of millions of people who are doing this all over the world, and hardly anybody, at least in American and I suspect European circles, has ever heard of it. So what we need to do is, as Peter said, put all this evidence out there relentlessly and get the attention that this all needs. And that is a big job. And there are many ways to do that job, a couple of which I know, and many ways that I don't. And I see ERA as a vehicle for showing what everybody is doing, what all the members are actually doing, and how effective it is, and how well the media has avoided us by and large, and we can't let them do that. Now, to me, just doing that, stepping into center stage globally, is a huge effort. So I see our primary mission is to make that happen. And I think that, raising money for a variety of causes and teaching people things and, all the kinds of things that our organizations do is very important, but the people who are doing that are the organizations. It's not the Eco Restoration Alliance, which is doing boots on the ground. It's the members of Eco Restoration Alliance, and our job is to promote the work of all our members. And as far as I can tell, nobody has done that yet. There have been organizations like the Global Landscapes Forum at the UN, and just the work of many of the people that we know of, like Michael Kravchuk and Jan Pokorny and Walter Jena and Alan Savory and on and on and on. But none of that has yet to cohere in a single overriding message. And that's what I see as the primary purpose of the Eco Restoration Alliance. If people want to set up a fund to the extent that it does not detract from the initial, the main message, I think that could be fine. But as Laura said, being a fiscal sponsor can get to be a huge job. So that's my case for our mission, and all the other things are secondary to ERA's mission. Not that people shouldn't do it, but getting out into the public consciousness relentlessly, and XR has tried to do that, and they've had a hard time, and various organizations, Sunrise and youth movements, and it has not come together in a way that's moving the big needle. And that's what I see our task as being. And I think that is what has attracted lots and lots of high quality projects and participants. So that's my 3 cents on that.
All right. So your key point, I want to make sure I've got it, is that we are a communications platform to amplify the work of our member organizations. And I guess that means that our non-organizational members are here in order to amplify each other as well, right? So the point is members may be people or organizations, and the ERA's job is to, I like the phrase, facilitate and amplify their work. And I like that because that includes the possibility that we can facilitate it by, for example, funding mini projects that help catalyze what we're trying to advance.
I think that's okay
Just
as secondary efforts, and certainly people who need that money like Marius deserve it, and somehow we want to facilitate their getting it. I'm not sure making that a big part of what ERA does is doable, because it will rapidly become a huge collection of problems, not only raising the money, but how to distribute it. Has anybody ever tried to distribute millions of dollars? I haven't, but I know people who have, and they're often not very happy people.
Okay, hands have gone up. Laura?
The reason that we were invited to ERA is because you were looking for $1 million.
That's true.
So I think that you were thinking of funding at the beginning of how to be able to incentivize and to, get the ball rolling and to have things go forward with all of those who are working. So I think that there's something that is definitely, I understand that we want to have communication. I work in communication. You need to have money in order to be able to have an impact, in order to be able to establish your brand, in order to be able to be a viable reference point to the public. So I think that we really need to be thinking as an organization, is the communication, if that's the main reason for ERA, I think that many of the discussions that are being held online are distracting.
Well,
we're talking about having a, just a communications channel. So I want to put that out there.
Well, thank you. I want to respond just briefly, which is that I think Adam's writing out a mission statement is in part his effort to say those are distractions. We have to identify, what ball is it we're trying to keep our eye on, what's primary and what's secondary. That's why we're discussing this, and it's not clear to me what the resolution is. I personally do think that it's going to be inevitable that some money flows in and some money flows out, and that the value of the mission statement, when we get it right, is going to be that it helps constrain what money comes in and what money goes out and what we have to do with. But I'm just reinforcing, Laura, that I think you've taken a counterpoint to Adam's notion that it's all about getting the word out, Maybe it's not just about getting the word out. And that's one of the issues I'd like us to start grappling with. Maya?
Can I just clarify something for Laura? We did not start with the intent of winning $1 million. We started with the intent of using the X Prize platform, co-opting it, if you will, to be the stage that where we would promote the work of our members and the importance of the eco restoration. But I do agree we need money, and I'm certainly not opposed to raising money for the kind of work we're doing, but that does not, in my mind, include becoming a funder. Just to clarify, and we'll continue
Okay.
the conversation.
Maya Dutta.
Yeah, maybe it's best that others go in direct response to this. I was just going to raise the question of if this is, and I'm looking at Adam's draft of a mission statement, if this is our mission statement, or if there are tweaks to it and we include more about kind of sponsoring and facilitating projects. Either way, I think it would also be helpful to define, what are our metrics of success? What does it look like to succeed at this? If we say, we're trying to be one kind of global entity, move the needle, what is success at moving the needle? And what are some of the concrete aims that we can achieve here? Is it, the establishing of legal and economic structures? Is it media showcase? Is it all of it? And so I would just like to toss that out there, maybe again for people to kind of respond to and share some concrete thoughts on. Thanks.
Thank you. Philip?
Yeah, can we go back to not screen sharing?
Yes, sure.
So I have a number of points. One, thank you, Adam, for drafting this. I think this is an essential component of who we are, and I think it should go through several meetings so that everyone has a chance to view it and chime in and discuss it. I've added the bracketed phrase, which for me is an essential part of the alliance, which is we're focused on cooling in the short term, and that needs to be emphasized in what we're trying to do together. Otherwise, in my mind, all is lost. Second, I don't see these as being in either war, not in conflict, but in fact reinforcing. And if we can say that one of the benefits of being an alliance member is that we help advertise what you're doing and you get funding for it, that's something that I think would create some loyalty and collaboration amongst all of us. We can structure the funding process to be no overhead at all if we just direct people to make contributions to the organizations, or we can figure out the solutions that Evan and others have for managing this. And I would just ask, in comparison to what the world is facing, what's a little headache of administering a few dollars?
Thank you. No hands are up. So I'm gonna, there is a document which has Adam's original draft, my revision. I'm gonna add to my revision Philip's insertion. But there are these larger questions about whether this is the right mission. I think the essence of this one is head-slappingly clear and right, which is that we are here to support the efforts of our members. It begs the question of what it means to support and amplify those members, and it begs the question of how do we select our members? So I think we still have work to do, but the point is, a good, clear mission is going to constrain and focus our attention. And that discussion is beginning. The discussion will also, I'm sure, be advanced by the visioning session a week from now. And that's all I have to say right now. Paula.
Well, just quickly in response to you, John, the essence of our mission is not how we support our members. The essence of our mission is how we promote the work that we're all doing. And that doesn't exclude supporting members, but the essence is getting on that center stage and making a lot of noise.
You know, that implies that we have a core competence at noise making, or that we can achieve a core competence at making noise in what is already a very noisy environment. And how you make that noise remains an open question. And this is why, you know, the whole answer is not completely obvious to me. I do think, Adam, that you have a sense of what's obvious, but I'm not sure it's captured in these sentences in such a way that everyone else can agree that it's obvious. So that's why we need to hash this through.
Hashing it through is fine. But I just wanted to get the statement of it, what you're calling the essence of my statement.
Absolutely. It advances the discussion, no question. Paula Phipps.
Hi, I actually want to do something that I suppose is really not a great thing to do, but I want to really ask people who are here and who have heard this discussion so far, but haven't kind of added their voice or put in their opinion, if they would do so, because I think it would be helpful.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And so we will endure an awkward silence until someone decides to speak.
I'll go first.
Thank you.
Although I will disclaimers, I'm pretty biased because I work with John and I work with Enable. But I think the idea of the ERA, and because my anticipation was that there was going to be, you know, at least a discussion about like a collective fund like Enable. Through Enable, I've seen these chapters, or in ERA's case, what will be members, you know, flourish even without Enable funds direct help. But I've also seen it, you know, fund other accomplishments. So I guess like I would be in favor of ERA managing money because I've seen it work, but I don't know, it's kind of hard for me to, you know, I've seen them both work. Like, even though Enable is just also works as a spotlight for chapters that gives them publicity, has been a lot of help, but they've also managed the money in a collective way, at least, to accomplish some goals.
Right, and thank you. I want to add that I promised to say a little bit about how Enable does it, so I want to do it because it also plays it has played an important cohesive and governance role. In Enable, and I would offer in ERA, anyone can propose a worthy funding project. The proposal gets discussed over the course of a week or two, during which votes are cast and votes can be changed as people say, well, if you change this, you would have my support. We have a threshold after the 2-week time period is up, where we say if we have near consensus, meaning 80% in favor, and at some minimal number of people voting, well, then it passes, and then the administration is fairly routine by Evan and the fiscal sponsor. What's interesting about that is that it wasn't clear what we were going to use that money for. We had money that just came in and we couldn't resist the notion of having it. And in the course of projects being voted up or down, we ended up developing some rules of thumb about what we thought we were really here for and how we thought the money should be used. And that was pretty interesting. So I don't think we're ever going to make a significant funding impact on the world, but I do think that funding projects that will benefit our members, even as we define who we are, is likely to play a valuable role in shoring up weak points, keeping certain valued members from simply dropping out because they lack something critical, and doing other things that we think would benefit our movement as a whole, whether these are members or not. Adam's hand is up again.
I just want to say that your template for what we're doing is Enable. And I think these are two very, very different organizations with very different needs and shooting at very different outcomes, different kinds of outcomes. So we all have our experiences that we bring to this, and they're all valuable, but I would just ask you to consider where they're analogous and where they're not.
That's got to be true. Other responses to Paula's invitation to weigh in if you haven't yet?
John, can I say something? This is
Yep,
Russ.
please. Absolutely.
Okay, I pretty much agree with you. I think it's important to have a fund that's will come in eventually, and have people present projects, but also it can be kind of a hybrid. We can be promoting them one way or another and encouraging people to donate directly to that entity, which would probably make things a little easier and a little smaller for the administrative on the ERA's part. But I think it's important that we have some funds for worthy members, and that's it.
And worthy projects. Thank you. Dwayne.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Paula, for the invitation. An old teacher of mine once said, better to remain silent and thought a fool than to speak out and remove all doubt.
Yet here you are.
Look, I'm more interested in listening to this conversation and providing any input where I think input might be needed. But look, it's important to have the conversation. One thing I would say is this, that the problems that we're witnessing and that we're talking about are not localized so much as they're universal. And over the last 15 or so years being involved in this movement, beginning with Peter Andrews, one of the things that was a standout for me was the project that was undertaken by the Chinese government in the Lewis Plateau. And that has stood out as a restoration project almost without equivalent. And it was a project that was begun and started around about the mid-90s. And within 10 years, they'd managed to convert 45,000 square kilometres of desert, into a functioning ecosystem. Now, that had to be, for me, one of the greatest projects ever that we've seen to date. And it was done by the help of the World Bank in cooperation with elements of the Chinese government. And it was a serious undertaking. 45,000 square kilometres is a big area. And we've got big areas like that in this country that need to be done. but we're not going to be able to restore them by each of us bringing a grain of sand to the project. So we really need a vision of the enormity of the task that faces us all, and an enormity of what's going to be involved in bringing these things together. And I would suggest that somewhere along the line that we put something like the Luce project as an absolute central focus and case study, because we know that we've got big problems in Africa. We know they've got big problems in North America. We know big problems here in Australia, in the Sahel, and in parts of Russia and elsewhere. And so each of us bringing, a handful or pocketful of sand to the project is not going to rebuild the beach at Copacabana that was washed away in the last cyclone. We're going to have to do it in a way that we envisage this in really big picture terms. Let's just define what the big picture is, and let's see how we can bring this wealth of knowledge and information that's contained within all of the people that are in our networks together in some way that we can actually make it happen, because we don't have a lot of time left. Thank you.
Thank you. This notion of how are we going to break through? How are we going to change the conversation? How are we going to get people to realize that this is a proven and available solution, and maybe the only available solution to the problem, is, I think, at the core of what we're doing. What we have to figure out how to do is to break through and to change the conversation and the awareness of this solution. How we do that remains an interesting question. And in some ways, how we decide what is the essence of our strategy remains an interesting question. Right now, we're having, it's sort of a fairly back and forth debate that says it's all about communications, or we could be funding certain projects, or we can do both, as Philip says, and I think that's true. But I suspect that there's more that needs to be said about how we're going to get it done, whether we describe it as communication or whether we have this internal fund for our own purposes. And it could be, for example, this is a segue, a promised segue. It could be, for example, that discussing our social media strategy will be a part of the way we get to that. So before we do that, Russ's hand is up. Anyone else who wants to respond to Paula's invitation, you get a chance to go after Russ, and then we're going to go to the last item on our agenda.
Rochelle did look as though she wanted to say something.
I did, and then I dropped my iPad. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is maybe it's premature to make a solid decision on this, but I'm leaning towards, I certainly would not be personally ready to write off the money part of it, because I think Maurice, was that his name, the gentleman who needed help getting
Marius.
Marius. I think we want to stay flexible to provide that kind of information. And I know for me, I'm here representing local government, in the United States, if you will, and I'm seeing a lot of opportunities in the work I do to share this message. I didn't even know the message was missing, and I think it's really important and to include this this connection that restoration provides between a lot of work that's already going on, from streamside restoration, biodiversity, anything to do with agriculture, connecting it to climate. I think it's just a really concrete way to show the interconnectedness of even more things, and then ultimately funding. You know, if you have a project and you can say, hey, look, this, you know, will provide healthy local food, but also if I do it this way, I improve the climate, it gives you more funding opportunities. So that's where I'm at. Thank you for suggesting that we all speak up.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Spear, who is on mute.
Thank you. This goes to Dwayne's point. There are two very large projects that one is Mikhail Kravchuk's Kosycha proposal. It's been approved by the Kosycha Parliament in about a year ago, and they're slowly working on it. But it's going to take $500 million altogether. It's an area about the size of Delaware, a little bigger than the size of Delaware, and I'm not sure how many square kilometers that is, but it's a pretty decent size. But probably more important is something that John and I and some others have been putting some real effort into, is the Marshall Plan to avert the dieback of the Amazon rainforest. And some scientists are pretty sure that if we go a few more percentages as far as how much is lost, there's about 20% lost now. If we go much farther, the biotic pump and different things will stop, and it'll slowly turn into a savanna, but very quickly it will affect weather all over the world. Again, that's what a lot of very well-respected scientists think. So as far as a showcase project, it would probably be working to avert the dieback of the Amazon rainforest.
In this
And
context,
that's bigger than the Loess Plateau. Go ahead, John.
okay, all right. Now, are you connecting that to our discussion about whether we should be a conduit of funding? Or you're just
Well,
saying that that's an alternative showcase project to recognize?
I'm saying it's to recognize. I think the funding is going to have to come from a lot of very big sources. That's being worked on by Marcel and Jamaica and me to get some really big funders. And I have a call after this about it with a good friend of a billionaire who's given a lot to help the Amazon in the past. And I don't think he knows about the Marshall Plan, so he's going to find out about it. We'll see what that does.
Okay. All right, this conversation will continue, and I think what we need to do, Cole, you can help me on this, or anyone else, is we need to summarize the issues that were discussed, make sure the discussion carries over into the discussion list, and involve people who aren't in on this call and see where it goes. It's going to be a gradual and an iterative process. Adam?
I just want to say that whatever the outcome of our core message or core goals are, that a biodiversity for a livable climate will continue to be a fiscal sponsor for ERA.
That's very nice. Thank you.
Well, I didn't think I was being nice. I thought I was being urgent.
Well,
thank you.
It's good to
for
know.
calling me nice.
All right. Well, okay. It's good to know. All right. So one of the ways messages go out these days, this is the segue. And Michael, I haven't forgotten that you want a few minutes, but one of the ways messages go out these days is through social media. And I just want to alert people to the current state of affairs. In the town hall meeting, we have links to the ERA's Facebook page, Facebook group, Twitter thing, and Instagram account. And we haven't mentioned LinkedIn. Oh, and YouTube and LinkedIn is missing. But we have them all. Now, currently, I, who spend a disturbing amount of time on social media, snatch things from our various members and from other places, and I circulate ones that are clearly on brand through those groups. The reason to do that, of course, is that you build an audience, you build a following, you get the word out, and hopefully you begin to cause these messages to propagate. Hart Hagen has got a bunch of Facebook groups, and has got a fair amount of experience and expertise in this. And so he is now administering our Facebook group. And Hart, maybe you'll tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how that could expand into a, if you have an answer to this one, into a more general social media strategy for us.
Okay. It's a thrill to be here, and I appreciate everyone's comments. I live in Louisville, Kentucky. I've been a native plant enthusiast for about 6 years. I'm president of our local Native Plant Society. More recently, I've done a climate radio show podcast, 330 episodes of me delivering a 30-minute sermon. And more recent than that, I have really, my interest in native plants and climates was all tied together. Native plants, ecosystems, climate was all tied together by an interest by soil and water. I think everything is there in soil and water, which, soil is foundational to ecosystems. Water is vital, but water flows through plants and animals and through the ground. So anyway, I just wanted to tell you what my interests and enthusiasms are. My friends and I have built a Facebook group called Wild Ones Louisville, which now has 2,300 members. I'm pretty sure I know how and why that happened. My friends and I have built a Facebook group called Water and Climate that now has 3,900 members, and that happened within a year. I'm pretty sure I know how and why that happened, and I'm willing to, bring whatever insights and skill I have in that to bear on ERA's Facebook group, which John formed for us yesterday, and it's ready to go. I've been posting some stuff, and hopefully the Facebook group itself, among other things, will be a place for us to cohere as a community. There are multiple ways. Not everybody's on Facebook. Different media suit different people differently. But I think the Facebook group can be one place where we get to know one another. We get to know our content. Being able to refer one another, I think, is core to my own understanding of what Eco-Restoration Alliance is about. So those are my brief introductory comments. Does anyone have any comments or questions about social media? What is the role of social media? What are the benefits of having a Facebook group? You'll notice that I'm going to, disclaimer here, Facebook groups are about the only thing I've really focused on and done successfully in the realm of social media. I have not spent very much time on Twitter or LinkedIn, but I have one of the reasons why my Facebook groups have been successful is that I use an app called Buffer to automate the process. I would love for 2 or 3 or more people in Eco Restoration Alliance to spend $15 a month on Buffer, and it will allow you to automate your posting to multiple Facebook groups, to Twitter, to LinkedIn. Instagram is a little bit tricky for some reason. I have not been able to use Buffer with Instagram, but so.
Okay. Cole?
I just had a quick question about if and how you've been measuring the impacts that have come as a result from the Facebook activity. I know the number of members in the group is a pretty good signifier, but if you have any measurement of what those people have done on their own or what other work that has inspired.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I have to confess to I'm very aware of my limitations in this regard. This is not my day job, and what is lacking with the Water and Climate Facebook group and with my Native Plants group in Louisville is a clear sense of what are the next steps in our customer journey. What do we want to come to that? How do we want this to come to fruition? What can we offer our audience that they can do next? I know that they want to do something next, but I haven't figured out what that is yet. So I will say that, okay, number of members is an indication, but you also want to look at engagement. How many people, and I have not quantified the number of comments or the number of likes or anything like that. I do know I have formed some very meaningful relationships as a result of as a result of both of these groups that have resulted in things like a planet. And I have deepened existing relationships with people as a result. And I am a fan of Facebook groups. I have been able to experience a degree of connection in that medium that I have not elsewhere. Part of the reason is that it's so easy. It shows up, whether or not somebody has liked or commented on a group. It shows up in your notifications, so it's easy to find. I have friends the ones that come to mind, Judith Swartz. I knew her before, but she has been engaged in the group. Michael Kravchik, I've become friends with him as a result of the group. There's a guy in Australia named Enviro Rob. I don't know Rob's last name. I think maybe Rob knows Peter Andrews or Dwayne, but anyway, so, but I think the struggles the impasse that we're at in the Native Plants group and in Water and Climate is maybe not altogether different from the issues that ERA is exploring. In what is it specifically do we do? What do we offer? What difference are we trying to make, and how do we do that? And I wanted to highlight something that Will said in a meeting the other day. And he said, we help niche achieve result by offer. So niche is who we're trying to help. Result is what we're trying to help them achieve. Offer is what we do for them, how we help them achieve that result. I think whether it's ERA or Water and Climate or any other group, you can have multiple offers, you can have multiple functions, you can have multiple audiences, but one at a time, there needs to be clarity as to who we're helping, what result we help them achieve, and what service we perform to help them achieve that result.
Well, and I think that relates importantly to our mission. That's why these conversations sort of tie together. You reminded me that the other very early idea I had when I was stirring the pot around the ERA was the notion that there should be a map, literally a map, in which everyone who is restoring a bit of dirt would be able to say, there I am, this is my contribution to the larger solution. That to me is a really important metric here. We not only have to get everybody recognizing this, but we have to get everybody being a part of making it be done. And I think that includes working on the dirt you walk on or you walk near. And I think potentially that is another really important, really actionable way of making use of social media, because people in your group post pictures of what they're doing and they talk about what they're doing. And if we could aggregate them to a map and see to it that they were showing that off and building a community, it might be a mechanism of rhizomatic growth of this movement. That, by the way, is an alternative way about thinking of what our mission is. It's not just to communicate, but it's to get almost everyone, almost everywhere, actually doing restoration work. I say that knowing that I hate gardening, but it's an interesting principle to think about. Okay, so Hart, thank you for what you're doing with our Facebook group, and we'll try to generalize what you're doing there to some of the other platforms, and we'll play around with it, and we'll be reporting back to the group. I heard you say you'd like a few other people to step up and use Buffer, and Cole or I are definitely on board to be a part of that. I know I am, because I want the time I spend being mesmerized by social media to do some good. And we'll see where this goes. Paula?
I know Tanya, our social media person, is using Buffer. I don't know whether she learned about it from you, Hart, but
I think she had been doing it, but she's going to be meeting with Hart and us soon, and we're going to try to compare notes and work out a methodology.
okay.
Okay. Michael Pilarski wishes to tell us about an initiative that he and John Liu are discussing.
Hi, yeah, a couple of updates here, but maybe I'll start with that one. So yesterday I was on a phone call with John D. Liu and 12 other people about a ecosystem restoration media collective. So the goal is to basically try to line up all the media films and YouTubes, et cetera, about ecosystem restoration in the world, and have them all lined up in one nice little column. So people can just, and it would be categorized by country, et cetera. And so that everybody would get more, there'd be more information going out. And that's a very new project, but I'm one of the people involved. And so just want to bring that to your attention, a media collective on this. And we'll, of course, keep you informed as things go along, since the first meeting was yesterday.
That's great.
Is this separate from EcoFlix?
This is exactly, you got it there. This is because John is working with EcoFlix and he wants to get all of these things up on EcoFlix. And so that would actually be the compiler rather than us. And so EcoFlix would then put it out to the network and people pay to be on EcoFlix. But the thing that John wanted to point out about EcoFlix is it's free to teachers and students. So he wants us to get all this stuff on EcoFlix and then reach as many teachers as possible in the world and say, this is at your disposal. You can sign up for free and you can show these things to your students. So so instead of it being behind a paywall, Now, all of a sudden, it's accessible to the students of the world. So it's a two-pronged approach, collating it and then getting it out to the teachers and students of the world.
I assume the collated collection would be visible online as well, yes?
That's to be determined. Right now, he's just working with EcoFlix. So if there's going to be another place where all that is listed, et cetera, with all the URLs, et cetera, that's another question, which would be, I wish I could say, yes, somebody is going to do that.
Well, let me just point out that a strategy which could work, you have the opportunity to crowdsource the curation and maybe even the creation of this content. When you're crowdsourcing, people are not going to be particularly interested in creating commercial content that is not otherwise accessible. But if you allow them to crowdsource it, as in, say, Wikipedia, in some sort of a shared place, it can still then be selected from and curated by EcoFlix while creating a larger commons that everyone can dip into. It's something to consider. I'll be happy to discuss this further.
Okay, yeah, very good. And there's a number of things to go into there, but I will just point out on my own, to my own whistle, that the Global Earth Repair Foundation has a Hall of Fame we're trying to find the best projects, people, organizations in the world doing restoration, particularly with YouTubes, but not necessarily. And we have a world map. You can click on Africa and Marius and all these people in Africa will come up, or you can click on Asia, etc. So we have a map. We are putting people on it. So like what you were saying there, John, about getting everybody on a map. So we've embarked on this, and we would like to turn it into a crowdsourced list, but we've just begun. But at least we've begun. And so you can look at that under Global Earth Repair Network or Foundation Hall of Fame. And could I make just another comment? And that this group here, I'm just so thrilled to be part of it. Ecosystem Restoration Alliance, or Eco Restoration Alliance. I am also part of Regenerations International, a part of Ecosystem Restorations Camp, a part of Water Stories, a part of the Permaculture Institute. I'm part of many hubs, or a number of hubs, of people doing ecosystem restoration. This is not the only one. This is one of many. But what I would like to do, or trying to do, is to integrate more of these together, have used more of the hubs know each other, because this is just one, and it's a great one, but we need to have interlinking of all the, and it's much more than my brain can hold, but I'm trying to be part of this group to, in a sense, relate it to other groups that I'm part of. So
I think,
just to let you know, I'm a spy for other groups.
I think all of us are in a similar situation. And one of the interesting questions is, what is the networking strategy that allows all of these groups to grow and be aware of each other without becoming one big homogeneous blob? In some ways, the Open Futures people are struggling with that and addressing it, in part by creating a platform that's meant to accommodate a number of groups, and we have a presence there. So that's something for you to be aware of, Michael.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Adam's hand is up again.
Apropos of social media and YouTube, I have a story to tell that I don't really understand very well, but it may be useful. And that is, after our first conference in 2014, we put all our videos, we videoed each presenter and put them all on YouTube. And I didn't think much about it for about a year. And then I saw this thing about Google Analytics that I thought, well, what the heck, why don't I take a look? And to my astonishment, we had something like 30,000 views of our, I guess at that point it was like 25 YouTube videos. Well, here we are 9 years later and have added videos all along. We probably have around 300 up now. And they have been viewed 300,000 times. And we have never advertised it. We have never said, go here, because this is where all this stuff is. People found it. And I would be really interested in figuring out how that happened. But it was like, build it and they will come kind of thing that you run into once in a lifetime, maybe. If we can somehow replicate that, I think that might be pretty cool.
I agree. I think that question of how this stuff spreads and goes viral is sort of one of the fundamental questions of the age. And we have to, you can't not worry about it. Have to see where it goes. I don't know if you can hear, but my dog is growling, maybe because he can hear that we're at the end of the agenda. And it's, for some of us, and it's all North Americans who are left on the call, it's getting pretty late. So this is a last call to see if anyone wants to raise any topics. I'm going to say, yes, Art.
I don't want to keep anybody. This can be continued at a future meeting, including maybe a one-on-one call, or if anybody wants to, maybe John, we can talk about some of this, but I have 5 pages that I wrote. About a half page was specifically preparing to talk about the social media. And then the rest of it is just thoughts about, trying to get specific, one at a time, get specific with what we do, who we're trying to reach, what specific results are we trying to help them achieve, and how specifically do we do that. So, part of that was I wrote a page about a vision, like, we're the ones who know the people you need to talk to. That's to be continued.
Art, would you be willing to share that?
Absolutely.
By email?
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course.
Well, this is where when you email it, copy the Eco Restoration Alliance group.
Okay.
And we're entering the period in which we're going to have a proliferation of documents which attempt to hold a mirror up to all of ourselves to figure out who we really are, which is great. I appreciate everybody's efforts here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is the conclusion of our 9 p.m. Bark Town Hall meeting. And I hope people don't mind this mix of administrivia as well as animal behavior, as well as commentary on the state of eco-restoration. Bark.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, John. Bye, everyone.
Thanks all. Have a great night.
Bye.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye all.